Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, personal property losses, part 2 in our series on the myths and material facts of bankruptcy with bankruptcy attorney Mallory Powers. Welcome to the second segment, Mallory.
Thank you.
Well, we're in the segment 2. You know, when I first heard about bankruptcy back in my 30s, I didn't know anything about it. I said, you have to surrender everything. But there's some limitations, right? Some things you get to keep personal, but you could lose a lot of your personal property here.
You could. It depends what you have. But the United States Bankruptcy Code provides exemptions for personal property for most consumers. So most people can keep a home, a car, household goods and furnishings. There are a lot of things that are carved out that you can keep. So,
but if you were behind your payments on your car, could you keep it still?
You can, but it depends what chapter of bankruptcy you're filing, and you will need to either get caught up on those payments or figure out some kind of arrangement with the lender.
Gotcha. Now, when I'm looking at this, you have exemptions and protections. Is there really a definition difference between these two?
Not really. They're pretty much the same. An exemption gives you your protection for your personal property up to a certain amount.
If I'm going to file, does it matter where I file? Like, are more states benevolent than others?
It does matter. So there's the federal exemptions, which the Bankruptcy Code provides for you. And then every state has their own set of exemptions as well. And every state's different. So you have to file your exemptions where you lived for the previous 2 years. So if you can file, so we're in Arizona. When you file bankruptcy in Arizona, you have to live here for the last 91 days. So you might have moved here 180 days ago from Tennessee, and then you have to file in Arizona, but you then look at the Tennessee set of exemptions and say, okay, am I using Tennessee, or does Tennessee allow me to use the federal? So it gets kind of complicated, but you wouldn't be using Arizona exemptions. So then you're using all of your property, looking at all your property values and saying, which fits me better? Is it federal or is it Tennessee? So there are a lot of different ways that this can go. And you look at your values and see, am I going to get to keep more things if I use this set or this set?
Yeah, I mean, if you thought you could stall for some time before you actually ultimately filed, and I guess you were researching what state was the most benevolent, I guess you could actually do what you're saying.
Yeah, you can.
All right, now, we're just going to talk about Arizona for right now for a moment. Everybody's going to be different. Check your state. I'm just telling you now so that I don't get email. We're looking at $150,000 equity. So if I had $150 grand equity, I could keep my home, right?
If you have 150 or less.
Or less.
Yes.
Okay, so I can keep it and they can't take it, touch it. Now, if I start getting across that line, are they going to take money out of that, or
they would force the sale of the home?
They would force the sale of the home. Okay.
And so a trustee would put the sale up for an auction, and anything over $150,000 would go to the trustee for the benefit of your creditors.
And vehicles?
Same thing for vehicles. The value for a vehicle in equity in Arizona is $6,000 currently. And these numbers are constantly changing.
For each vehicle or for one vehicle?
It's per person.
Oh, so your wife, your husband?
Right. So each person gets one exemption for a vehicle. So if you do have a joint filing, then you each get your own exemption for a vehicle. So that's $12,000. And you can't stack those exemptions. So you can't put the $12,000 on...
the one car and not the other.
Well... You can if you use the full, but you can't put $10,000 on one car and $2,000 on another. You can't split it up like that. So most times you're doing $6,000 on one and $6,000 on the other. But if you have a vehicle with more than $6,000 in equity, then you're probably going to lose that vehicle.
Okay, and what about this household goods furnishings, including consumer electronics?
Right, so that changed recently.
Higher or lower?
To include consumer electronics. So in the technological age, people have cell phones, computers, the laws used to say typewriter, and people don't usually use typewriters anymore. So now...
I don't. I don't.
So now the laws include computers, and it's unlimited for consumer electronics in the range that they give you.
Okay, so, my iPhone 10, if you bought one, right? That's $1,000 right there. I mean, depending upon what you spent on it. and computers. But a lot of this stuff devalues the moment it hits the street. So by the time you get to the true market value, falling under $6,000 on a vehicle or computers and stuff like that, it sounds pretty easy to get. Am I true?
It depends. It depends. Some people try to plan for bankruptcy by buying all their stuff just before filing bankruptcy, so they can.
Well, how far back does bankruptcy go back then? If you're charging this,
what do you mean?
Well, if I'm going to charge for all these good things, the electronics that I did, I put it on my credit card, and then I filed bankruptcy. How far back do they go to say, that we're not going to allow that?
Usually only 90 days for credit cards if you're charging it. But what they actually do is they look at resale value. And we also look at kind of an auction value, because that's what the trustee is going to do. The trustee is going to auction everything off if it's over the exemption limits. So we look at those values and say, okay, well, what will a trustee get if they try to auction? And that's how we look at the value and determine what your price is. So when you're listing your value of your assets on your bankruptcy petition, you're going to go auction value, resale value.
When I'm looking at my qualified plans, I mean, people, they may blow it in every other arena, but they've been having their employer match it, and they've been putting it dutifully inside their retirement plan. They may have some serious money in there. Bankruptcy touch that?
It depends. Every answer is it depends. But there are exemptions that cover qualified retirement plans. There are limitations on when you can, how long before filing bankruptcy you can put money into those accounts. But as long as you're within that time frame, then those are covered. They're protected. Okay,
and what about, I know a lot of people that have tons of money in cash value life insurance. What about that?
Life insurance, there's an unlimited exemption, but
Is that just our state, or is that any state?
That's a federal exemption, I believe. Again, there's a time frame. So you can't have put anything in there, I want to say within 2 years of filing bankruptcy, or you have to have owned the policy for 2 years before filing bankruptcy.
Hey, what if I'm celebrating my tax refund in the middle of this whole thing? What then?
Tax refunds are tricky. So now we're heading into the end of the year here. There are times where a client will tell me they're expecting a $20,000 tax refund, and I will say, wait until after you get that to file a bankruptcy. And that's because when you file bankruptcy, that is your cutoff date. So then they prorate your tax refund for the following year based on when you file. So right now, a trustee is going to get most of that $20,000 if you file bankruptcy today. But if you wait until you get the refund, spend it on reasonable and necessary items, and then file the bankruptcy, then your cutoff date is going to be next year for the following year. So you have more time to actually
here's what I just heard you say, Mallory. You said the time that you actually physically file, constructive receipt, the court receives it, that's the clock starts.
Right.
Okay. Now, 25% of my wages, I didn't know this was on I looked at your list here and I was like, hey, I'm filing bankruptcy. Now you're going to garnish a part of my wage? How does that work?
Yeah, that's an Arizona-specific rule. And every state might have something similar, but this one is that a trustee can request 25% of any wages that have been earned but not yet paid by the date of filing.
How far back, or just the date of filing?
Just the date of filing. So for most people, a paycheck runs about 2 weeks. And so you might be getting paid right after filing bankruptcy. And so at that time, that might be 25% of a whole paycheck that a trustee can request.
You can actually, if you had 4 or 5 bank accounts, and is it total bank accounts, or each bank account, they have $300 or less?
That's only one bank account.
One bank account.
For one person. So if you have
maybe your wife could have another one.
Right.
Gotcha.
You can have a joint couple who's filing, and then you each get the $300 exemption in a bank account. So this one is tough for people because people say, well, how am I supposed to get down to $300? But what they don't realize is they're spending their paychecks every single month or every time they get paid. So it's a timing thing. We wait until they get paid, and then they spend their money on their normal bills, their rent, their mortgage, their car payment, their utilities. You've spent all that. It's out of your account, and we wait until just before you're going to get paid again.
How about these ancillary things like, hey, I have boats, recreational vehicles, I have a watch I wear when I go out big time. I have another watch I wear when I work out, and they're not cheap.
Right. A lot of those things are considered non-exempt property. So those are things where if you tell your attorney, if you're using one, to take a look at these things and they're things you want to keep, you might have some problems with it. There is some pre-bankruptcy planning that you can do to, maybe you're going to sell it and then you take that money and spend it on something else and get your bank accounts down again. But in most cases, you're not going to be able to keep those kind of things.
Now, I noticed here, this is a little surprising, jewelry. Are you saying that my wedding ring and engagement rings, those are set aside as an exempt piece of property?
In Arizona, you get a certain amount of an exemption for wedding and engagement rings only, but not for any other jewelry.
Okay.
So if you have, a nice diamond necklace, that's not going to fall into that category.
That would be a tough sell, wouldn't it, to start surrendering that?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, this is really important for us to learn these things and to know what our rights are, what's protected, and our exemptions and protections that go with this. I think this is really important to know. I love the fact that you deal with people that actually sometimes don't even file at all. They work it out.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways to do it. Well, listen, don't forget, we're gonna watch the next segment called "Not All Things Are Forgiven." Wow, part 3 in our series on the myths and material facts of bankruptcy. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or your financial advisor. You've been listening to Steve Savant's Money and Neighborhood Again.